Hi everybody, it's Dave Mongello. Starting a new show here. Going to call it Real Niagara Times. It's going to be mostly community, local government, what goes on in the county, maybe some state issues. The show's sponsored by my auto repair shop, of course. Mongello's. I do tires, brakes, collision repair, computer diagnostics, everything. Any questions about the show? If you want anything to be on the show, or if you want to be on the show yourself, email me at lockport@me.com, or you can give me a call at 625-6125 at my business. Today's topic is going to be about South Lockport Fire Department. I was a member there for a little over 3, almost 4 years, and I'm very supportive of the fire company still. There's an issue with funding right now that they're going through. It's been an ongoing issue regarding funding. I talked to some past members about the budget negotiations and past chiefs, and they said, well, we really couldn't decide anything because the amounts are decided and all the fire companies vote and it gets approved. This year it was a little different because for the past 3 years they were aware of the underfunding issues, and they've been trying to negotiate, and tend to be a little ignored. So there was a Buffalo News article that came out end of last year because 20 firefighters showed up at the meeting unhappy with the approved fire budget that really wasn't approved by them themselves. So they were there to voice their opinion, and what they got was a not too nice of a that they were even there. So Mark Smith, the current supervisor, who was really, in my opinion, supposed to negotiate, really didn't talk to him much about the extra money. I think there was some false promises being made. We got to look into that, got to ask some questions. And then Mark Crocker, the current supervisor, said, well, we're going to have to audit your books, which is almost like a threat, in my opinion. Why say, well, we got to do an audit to see what's going on? It's like, instead of actually looking at the true numbers of what's going on, they ought to right away threaten audit. It in my opinion, is not good business practice to do something like that. Why not visit the fire company, visit other fire companies, and if they want to do an audit, why don't they say, well, let's get all these companies together and see where they stand financially so they can see what's going on. But that wasn't done. They said, we want an audit. So I was a member there. Here's my, I think they're in a fire. There's one of South Lockport's trucks there in the picture, and there's some helmets that I painted for the Explorer program I shop. When I was as a member, I would see these explorers, these young kids. They started this program to get young people involved in the fire department, and they used a lot of the older gear, and the kids loved it. They get to run the hoses, see what the fire department's all about, and see if they really want to do that when they get older. It's a great introductory program they had. And the helmets they ended up having were some donated. They're all different colors. I said, you guys, if you don't mind, let me paint these helmets. They're not being used for firefighting, so I don't have to paint flame-proof paint on them. So I donated some of my time, and I took and I taped them all off and made some nice American colored American flag helmets there. The demographics and the funding is the whole thing. South Lockport's one of the very few companies that's only in one town, so they only get funding from one town, where other fire companies like Rapids, Wright's Corners, Terry's Corners, basically almost all other companies in Niagara County, besides a few, they get funding from other surrounding companies. So South Lockport only gets funding from the town of Lockport. For example, Rapids gets funding from Royalton, town of Lockport, and Clarence. Wright's Corners gets funding from Lockport, Newfane, and Heartland. And I might be missing a few there, but just so you get a rough idea. In the past, fire companies got funded by the community. So they were active, they got donations, had parties, had fundraising events, and that's how they were supported. Strong, very strong community involvement, which we tend to have lost over time. Now what has happened? A lot of loss of community values. People are busy. Distraction with sports and other events, and the cost of equipment has gone through the roof. Funding per call, one thing we've noticed, and I did this graph to show you, is that South Lockport in the pink is the amount of funding it gets. You compare to Wrights Corners second, you got Rapids, and then you got Grand Island. I brought Grand Island to it because Grand Island gets a similar amount of calls to Lockport, yet Grand Island gets $1 million a year. South Lockport gets about $370,000 a year to do more service because Grand Island does not transport ambulance. South Lockport does. That ambulance call that costs $1,600, South Lockport will typically do that for you if they have the manpower to do it. Wrights Corners and Rapids, they transport too. But Grand Island gets almost $1 million to respond to the same amount of calls that South Lockport does within about 1,000. I think they have between 500 to 1,000 more sometimes. So you can see that in the green is the population density. The calls are in the blue, the amount of calls and the funds the companies get. So you can see right there alone that Rapids and South Lockport are underfunded. Wrights Corners gets what they should. The shortfall looks like it's about $630,000 for South Lockport and about $300,000 for Rapids. When you look at comparing to other fire companies, for example, Wrights Corners, comparing to Lockport calls, South Lockport gets 9% more funds to go to 71% more calls because South Lockport's in a busier district. This is something I never looked into, and the cost of doing this is ridiculous. And to prove the point, there's me, a photo on the right. When I first got my gear, the gear must have been 20 years old, had holes in the knees. It was terrible looking. Where you see the guys on the left, there's me in the middle at a firefighter 1 training. There's kids I went in there with, they had brand new gear from these other fire companies. There were other companies around the county, and even the gear I had then was over 10 years old because they gave me a little bit of updated gear. So how are you going to keep volunteers in these companies when you give them this worn out equipment? It's not a very good way to do, keep, people involved, but that's what they have to do. Companies getting what they should is Wrights Corners and Terry's Corners when looking at call volume per money. The Terry's Corners, though, they has a very low amount of calls, but they do have the high overhead of maintaining the fire hall. But the advantage of that is that with the low amount of call, they do have more time doing fundraising events and raising money. So where Terry's Corners gets 100, 150 calls, South Lockport gets 1,200 calls. The members are responding to over 100 calls a month at South Lockport, and yet at Terry's Corners maybe 10. So they have a lot more time to raise money. So it's kind of balances out in the long run, it seems. There's the funding and the time it does. So the other thing I looked at was how Lockport funds the fire companies and what they tax percentage-wise. So one thing I found out is that the town of Lockport is way under taxing for fire protection, yet their special district taxes on average are higher for other things. So they're cutting back on the fire tax and yet charging you taxes in other areas. So when you look across the board there, you got Lockport first, Cambria, Heartland, Newfane, Pendleton, Royalton, and Wheatfield. The first pink is tax percentage, the blue is the amount of money collected, and the green is the amount of calls. So you can see the green where there's a larger amount of calls. In Wheatfield, they typically have more funding. So all the companies where there's a larger amount of calls, they typically have more funding. So you can actually see the funding is actually higher in Royalton, Pendleton, Newfane, Heartland, and Cambria per call, which is quite interesting, which really shows that, okay, why is Wheatfield under the taxing? But it's an interesting way to look at the bar graph to see the true picture of what's going on. Tax collected, so town of Lockport collects about $1.5 million in taxes, special district tax, to give to the fire companies for fire protection. One thing we found out is that, okay, there's $400,000 that's missing somewhere. We don't understand where this money is going, if it falls through from the next budget, but we got to look into that and see what's going on. It doesn't make any sense. If they're collecting this much, where's it going? And why isn't it balancing out? South Lockport has one of the richest districts because you have the Walmart Supercenter, you have the Home Depot Plaza, you have Yahoo. Street is in the South Lockport area. So we're calculating that roughly $600,000 in fire protection tax is being collected in this district, yet only $370 that goes to South Lockport. Where does the rest go? Big question. Why are the elected officials saying we want to see an audit instead of looking at these basic numbers to see what's going on? Who deserves to get paid? Elected officials going to a few town board meetings, or firefighters risking their lives, going to over 100 emergency calls a month, car accidents, house fires, smoke alarms, ambulance calls, landing, mercy flight. These elected officials work maybe 20 hours a week if you're lucky, getting paid $50 to $75 an hour. Plus, if you're an elected official for more than 5 years, you get lifetime health benefits for the rest of your life. And yet, what do firefighters get? Yeah. Oh, okay, the firefighters get to spend $250 to $1,000 in their own money and gas. They get paid nothing. They lose precious time from their families, and that can never be replaced. They miss work because we spent all night fighting a fire. We're too beat to even go to work. We got aches and pains from moving these heavy hoses full of water, crawling over and under cars that are rolled over sometimes. And if we're lucky, when we turn 65 years old, we'll get $400 a month in a retirement program, which really doesn't pay for it in the long run. So it's quite interesting to look at the numbers and see what they're getting and what they're not getting, yet the elected officials refuse to look at the grassroots numbers of how much these fire companies help the community and what they actually do. Stop doing this. Look at the numbers, offer them what they're worth. Thanks for listening. Any comments, call me at my garage, 625-6125, or send me an email. Thanks for listening, and hopefully you'll tune into the next one.